Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of The Cutaway. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about sound design and its influence on one of the most impactful and important scenes in Raman Raghav 2.0. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with sound design, it's a pretty long and tedious process, and it's kind of complicated to explain in a short little video like this. So, if you guys are interested in hearing more about it, let us know in the comments, and we'll be more than happy to do a video on it in the future. But for now, let's get right into this one. In 1979, Francis Ford Coppola created one of the greatest war movies of all time, entitled Apocalypse Now. Walter Murch, the film's editor, also received the very first sound designer credit. What Walter did on this film was truly revolutionary and helped usher in a new era of cinema, what we like to call postmodern era. Now, for the longest time, Hollywood treated sound like you would in real life. If you see a bus, you're going to hear a bus. If you see a bird, you're going to hear a bird. If you see a gun, you're going to hear a gun. But what Walter Murch did is he turned that idea and flipped it on its head. In one of the early scenes of Apocalypse Now, you see Martin Sheen laying on his bed in Vietnam, and he's looking at the ceiling fan, and as the fan is rotating, he begins to hear the Huey helicopters that he's so accustomed to hearing in Vietnam. And this is one of the first times in which we saw something, but we didn't hear it. And what I mean by that is, we should have heard the fan, but we don't hear a fan at all. We hear helicopter blades. But we can make the association between a helicopter and the ceiling fan blades, because like a helicopter blades, ceiling fans are very similar. What this small and simple sound design element allows for Francis Ford Coppola to do in the film is it allows for you to extend the visual information that you're receiving. We could have just seen him in Vietnam, but instead we wanted to get inside Martin Sheen's head and to truly understand what it was like to go through the war. Because even in a comforting zone like a bed, he still cannot get it out of his head that he is a part of a war zone. In Raman Raghav 2.0, Vineet D'Souza, the sound designer for the film, also implements similar tactics here. Early on in the movie, Ramana turns himself into the police, and there's a 7.5 to 8 minute interrogation scene in which he confesses to the murders and in grave detail explains how one of them took place. In this particular scene, sound design is being used to not only enhance the overall mood and tone of the scene, it is also being used to entrance the audience. Anurag wants his audience to know that what Ramana's saying is true. And he's doing this by adding in layers of sound design. In the very opening of the scene, he mentions that it starts to rain. And you actually hear rain. But is it raining in this scene? Absolutely not. Towards the end of the scene, he mentions that he has a wireless radio, and he pulls it out of his pocket.
उसके पास वायरलेस था रेडियो जिसको दुनिया बोलता था इससे वो भगवान से बातें करता था. You hear the wireless radio turn on, but you don't see anything. But you hear it. As God is supposedly talking to him through this radio, you can hear the sound effect of the radio. It's these added elements that allows for Anurag to really bring the immersion level to an all-time high. He wants you in that scene with Ramana. He wants you to feel it. He wants you to feel that confession that Ramana's making. And by doing little subtle elements like this, you might not even realize it, but Anurag is doing exactly that. He's pulling you into his story that would otherwise be boring without these added elements. Because if you could imagine for a second that there was no score, that there was no sound design, that it was just Ramana talking to cops, yes, it would be inherently interesting, but it would not be the best version of this scene. And that's why it's a great scene. Now, to wrap this up, there's one more missing piece of sound design from this scene that I have not touched upon, and I consider to be truly amazing. Towards the end of the scene, Ramana starts to talk to Raghavan, and he says that he's been watching him very carefully.
उनको लगता है अपन आपको आपसे ज़्यादा पहचानता है.
Now, as this scene progresses, you start to hear that title track, the music from the club in which we are very first introduced to Raghavan. Now, the significance of this moment is not only does it connect that this cop was the same individual at the beginning of the movie, just in case you missed it, it also allows for a connection to develop between Ramana and Raghavan. Nothing is explicitly stated, but because of the audio cue as a result of sound design, we as the audience are able to make the connection that these two men both know that they are both killers. And as a result, it allows for the movie to progress to a new level of heightened tension. All because of sound design. Thanks, guys.